Hey, this is Russ. Time to do a smoking video. It's been a while since I've done one, and so I figure I better do one now. I've been smoking things on my smoker, but I haven't been recording them because they all start looking the same after a while. So this time, I decided I was going to use the smallest smoker I have, which is the Weber Smoky Mountain 14.5-inch smoker. Now I have all three sizes, and they all have their purposes. But the small one is a little more limiting. If you're doing something small like what I'm doing today, I'm doing an 8.5-inch pork butt today. Then the 14.5 is fine. Okay. If you want to use something like ribs and you want to do full racks of ribs, yeah, it's not going to happen on the 14.5. I suggest you go to the 18.5 or stuff like that. I'll put a link on the video here so you can see some of the more popular videos I have concerning the 18.5-inch smoker. And I have the 22.5 as well. With that one, if I use a rib rack, a special rack for it, and I do it on the upper and lower grates, I can get 12 full slabs of ribs in there. So you can do quite a bit of smoking with the large one. But again, that also eats up more charcoal too. So I use the smallest one when it's just personal, something that you're just going to do a small amount and you don't need to go to the large ones. And the 14.5 is perfect for that. So I wanted to try to see how well I do. I don't use that one that often, and I wanted to see if it's actually as good as the other smokers. Now, I will tell you that I'm editing the video this time. I'm not going to talk straight through it, so I'm going to do a voiceover. And as I'm putting this intro together, I will tell you there was some challenges. So you want to watch this video in its entirety to see what kind of challenges I had to go through to get this thing to work properly. Okay. Anyways, let's get rolling. So let's start out. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to light the charcoal, and I use a chimney starter to do this. Sorry for the shaky video because I'm using a body mount. So it's attached to my chest. It's a chest mount. And the 14.5 hadn't been used in a while, so I had to clean it off pretty good. And yeah, there were spider webs in there and everything. So yeah, you got to clean it off. I do put water in the smoker to try to maintain the temperature. And this is one of the challenges I had throughout this smoke, is to get the temperature down. Now, typically low and slow is the best way to do it, but I could not get this thing lower than 315 degrees when I got this thing started. So I'm using pork butt purchased at Mariano's. This is Smithfield, and I did use another brand before this. I did an 18.5-inch smoke just about a week or two ago, and the pork butt I think was better than what I'm getting here from Smithfield. It was softer and easier, and literally that one fell apart the minute I took it out. The total pull time, maybe 10 seconds. And I'm wondering whether I can do the same thing here with this one on the 14.5-inch smoker. Now, I think the meat has something to do with it too, because it was a softer feeling meat. I never buy frozen pork butt. It's always fresh. And that other one that was actually from Hormel was actually very soft when I had it, and I cut it in half. I'm going to cut this one in half too. And you notice that I actually remove the fat cap. There's not much of a fat cap on this one, but some of them are really, really thick. Now, there are people who prefer to leave the fat cap on and let the fat render down into the meat. But, a pork butt has a lot of internal fat as well, and I don't think it really needs all this. Plus, it just inhibits the rub from getting in there. So I'm going to cut this in half. In the past, I've cut it lengthwise the other way, which makes it thinner. And this one that I did on the 18.5, I accidentally cut it straight down the middle. So I'm going to do that exact way on this one too. Now I'm going to use Costco's rub here. This is kind of hard to find. They don't have it that often, but this is kind of a saltier rub, which I know it's not as great, but I still had some left, so I wanted to use it up. And I'm going to fill up the entire fronts and sides and backs of the whole thing. Anything that has an exposed meat, I'm going to put some rub on there. And because we have two pieces now, we'll just do section by section. All right. The rubs, a pork butt can handle quite a bit of rub because it's quite thick, and if you want a lot of bark, you want a lot of rub. All right, and of course, the more surface area you have, the more ability to get more bark. Now, a lot of people like the bark. I do too, but sometimes these things are cooked so long that the bark turns, it's like black. That I don't like. I like it when it's not quite black. All right, so I don't cook it to that level. And smoke doesn't go into your meat once it gets past a certain level too. So usually what I do is I will smoke this up until the stall when the meat doesn't go any higher in the internal temperature, and then I usually will wrap it in aluminum foil or put it in a aluminum foil pan and then wrap the pan. Now, the 14.5-inch smoker, one of the challenges is that these pans don't quite fit, because as you'll see when we put this on the smoker, these two sections of meat are going to take up the entire space. So there's not a whole lot of space that you can put an actual pan in. So the only thing I can do for this one will be to actually use aluminum foil and wrap them individually that way too. And a lot of times I will add water in there or apple juice to give it a little more moisture. Now this ThermoWorks smoke unit that I'm using, I'm actually using two of them. I purchased these before they had the 4-channel versions, so I have two individual ones. I'm going to put a probe in for the pit temperature, which is the first probe I usually attach. But in this case, I'm going to attach the meat probe. So I put that on the bottom. And then on the top one over there, I'm going to put the pit temperature probe. And it kind of looks like this, so you can get an idea what the pit temperature probe looks like. Okay, it's kind of a flattened one. And so that'll measure the pit temperature and also one of the meats. So the other one, I'm going to use the other thermometer to measure that temperature. I like keeping track of both of them because there's different temperatures within the internals. The one with the bone in it still will probably have a lower temperature once it's out on the grate. So keeping an eye on that is kind of critical. So the stall usually doesn't happen for a couple of hours. I've seen it happen as early as 2 hours. Sometimes it'll take 3 hours, sometimes longer. But last time it took me about 3 hours before I hit the stall, and then I started wrapping. But again, like I said, even if you left it open, hoping to get a smokier flavor, you're not going to get that, because once it hits a certain temperature, the smoke essentially, that's it. It's not going to go anymore into the meat. These are the remote receivers that I have. So that'll send the signal from the main unit to these, and these I will keep in the house with me as I'm watching throughout the entire cook. So this is how I keep track of things. I don't need to be running outside all the time. So putting the meat on the grate is, or drop it on the grate in this case, is pretty easy. But as you'll see here, this is a small smoker, so this is taking up the entire space. Now the pit temperature is actually underneath that grate. I invert mounted it, and that allowed me to put the probe underneath the grate. So if you take a look at the smoker, you get this this smoke coming through. I usually leave the bottom vents to about a pencil width, but I will tell you that keeping this thing at a low temperature was kind of hard. Like I said, to start, I was getting about 315 degrees of temperature. Pit temperature, and I couldn't get it any lower. I even almost totally closed the vents on the bottom. I usually leave the top vent open wide, and even with closing it, I couldn't get it any lower. So this is going to be a faster cook, I think. And after 2 hours, this is what the meat looks like. Not too bad, really. All right, let's see how it goes as it goes on. All right, it's time to wrap the meat. The internal temperatures had hit 152 degrees on both portions. So I think we're at the stall. And wrapping the meat essentially will push through the stall quicker. No more smoke is going into that thing, so it's fine. And I'm going to adjust the top vent so we can get a little bit better pit temperature again. So after a little bit of time, we're now at 6 hours. We hit a second stall. Pit temperature was 228, but the meat was stuck at 181 and 177. So going into 8 hours, you see that we've gotten a pit temperature of 233, but the meat is at 192 and 190. Now, it never did break that. So I finally took it out after 8.5 hours with the internal temperature hitting the high of 192. Now, I guess we could have continued on longer and put more coal in there to try to get it to go, but it was already getting late. It was nighttime by the time I had pulled everything out. But you can see that the bone is coming out not as clean as I would like it to come out. Usually it comes out really easily. Now, the last time I did a cook, that meat pulled apart in like 10 seconds. Now, you see here, as I'm working this, you'll see there's some big chunks. And those are the chunks that were not as soft as others. You can see I'm kind of struggling to pull it through. So while the taste is just as good, it wasn't falling apart. So that tells me that the quality of the meat makes a difference, okay? And it could also be, too, that the temperature was not as well controlled with the 14.5-inch Weber Smokey Mountain. I could not get it down to a low enough temperature that I prefer. I prefer to do this cook at about 165 or lower, but we were at 315 degrees for a long time, and that was even closing down vents and everything. So I don't think the 14.5 smoker will actually give you the same quality. That's my results. So what's my conclusion? Well, the 14.5-inch Weber Smokey Mountain is capable. If you taste the meat, it's exactly the same as if I put it on the 18.5 or the 22.5 smoker. But I will say this, the regulation of the temperature is tougher. I could not bring that thing lower than 300 something degrees. And I think that's because being a small smoker, you can't do what we call the minion method, where you take the charcoal, you make a ring around the charcoal ring, and you leave the center open so that when you dump that charcoal, the lit charcoal in there, nothing else is there. So the heat will start dissipating outwards towards the other unlit charcoal, and that gives you a longer cook time. But in the 14.5 smoker with the the charcoal ring so small, when you dump in the lit charcoals, they go on top of other charcoal. So next thing you know, your temperature is running away. It's getting higher than you prefer. Now, I prefer to do these type of cooks with the pulled pork, probably in the, I would say, between 225 and 265 max. Hoping to stay under 250, really. That's my preference. And I couldn't do that with the 14.5. So although you get the flavor, you get the taste, you don't get the smoothness of that pulled pork. You saw that some sections were kind of chunky, and I couldn't pull it. Now, the last cook I did, I wish I had recorded that one. I did it on the 18.5. I did have, I think, better meat. That was actually from Hormel. This one was from Smithfield, but I could tell that meat was better because when I lifted it up out of the package, it was so soft. I already knew that it's like, wow, this is typically when I get a pork butt, it's sometimes they're kind of solid. You know, they're not frozen, but they just feel solid. This one was kind of floppy. So I knew that the meat quality was better. So that helped. But that last cook, when I went to pull it, literally both sections together pulled apart in about 10 seconds. I'm not exaggerating either. That thing literally fell apart. On this one, you can see there was chunks as I was pulling on it, and those are the ones that were not really as soft. Okay, it's cooked, but it's not as soft. So if you're expecting the exact same quality using the smaller smoker, I don't think you're going to find that. It's harder to do. It works, but it's harder to do. My personal preference for most things that I do is the 18.5 inch smoker. It's the most flexible, doesn't use up a ton of charcoal if you don't need to. If you have a party, which you shouldn't be having right now, by the way, with the pandemic. But if you had to do a lot of ribs, for instance, I could do 12 full uncut racks of ribs in that 22.5 by using racks that essentially are the ribs stand vertically, so you have one next to each other. You can do about 6 of them on the top grate and 6 in the middle grate. So really, you can do 12 full stacks of ribs. So that's a lot. But unless you're doing things like that, really, the 18.5 is really the one I usually recommend most people consider. It's the most flexible. It's a less expensive smoker. It uses less charcoal, and it's easier to work with, I think. And you can do a lot with it. So that's my conclusion. All right, 14.5 is capable, not as easy to work with. All right. Anyways, if you liked this video, hit the like button. If you're new, feel free to subscribe. I will forewarn you, we don't do lots and lots of cooks. All right. My channel is slowly turning into more of a knee replacement channel, which is fine. But I do other things. So once a week at least, we'll do a knee replacement thing. And then, of course, we'll supplement 1 or 2 other videos during the week with other things. And so there's some music videos you can watch me play my instruments and sing and things like that, and hopefully you like those things. And if that appeals to you, go ahead and subscribe. Okay. Anyways, those who've been with me for a while, you know what it is, right? I'll talk to you guys next time.